Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first episode of 2022. This is Wild Wild Podcast, and we're finishing off today a little mini season on the Decameron inspired films from the early 1970s. With me, as ever, is Rod Barnett. Hello, Rod.
Hello, Adrian. How are you doing?
Yeah, I am really good. Thank you. And how was your Christmas?
Nice and quiet, which is exactly what I wanted. There's just too much hectic activity in my life, and it was good to have a day or so where I could not have to be anywhere.
Did you manage to get the opportunity to catch up on your huge stack of unwatched Blu-rays over Christmas?
I wouldn't say catch up, but I did make a dent. I watched a few.
We're never going to catch up, are we?
No, I have. I have come to the conclusion that catching up is an impossibility, but I think that waging a constant battle against the giant stacks of DVDs and Blu-rays and the ever encroaching desire to see more, that's part of the joy. But I mean, yeah, I was able to take some time to see to watch some things that I was really happy to finally watch. Some things that, fresh to DVD, and some things that are really, really obscure and in some cases terrible. So yeah.
So keeping with the Italian theme, were there any Italian movies in there?
Let's see, Italian. Well, yeah, shot in Italy. I did rewatch for the first time in years and years and years both Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula, the two Paul Morrissey films that I literally had not seen in probably, I want to say 15, 18 years, something like that. And so that was a joy, but I don't know that I would call those Italian movies.
Well, I don't know. I think it counts.
Well, I did watch for the first time Gang War in Milan, the Umberto Lenzi crime film from '73.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, it's a good one. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. And the biggest surprise to me was I watched the British film 80,000 Suspects from 1963, written and directed by Val Guest, and it was fantastic.
I've still got that sitting in my cupboard, which I haven't watched yet, but I know I should.
Well, this is the perfect time, considering it's about a pandemic outbreak.
Pandemic. Yeah.
It's a really good film.
Maybe that's what's been putting me off. I don't know.
Maybe man, I got to tell you, it's an exceptional movie. Very well written, very well directed. Val Guest was, I think he continues to be an undersung genius of filmmaking. He's incredible.
Yeah, I really like the Day the Earth Caught Fire. That's his, isn't it?
Yes, and he did the first two Quatermass films, When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, a couple of war movies for Hammer as well. He's just one of those guys who really, really knew what he was doing, and just amazing. My most dire watch was in an attempt to watch some of the more obscure films that starred Spanish actress Emma Cohen. I watched the 1975 film. It's a Spanish Robin Hood film called Robin Hood Never Dies. Oh my God! It's we found a trunk of Robin Hood clothing. Let's attempt to use $15 to make a Robin Hood film. It's miserably bad.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. Sometimes you need to watch the bad to then, when you see something that's maybe not brilliant but not terrible, it helps you to appreciate it a bit more.
It readjusts your scale. Yeah.
Bit like our film we're watching today, perhaps. I caught up the other day with Nosferatu in Venice.
Oh yeah, interesting film. I don't know. Yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, interesting is the way. Well, what I felt like I was watching. I don't know about you, but over lockdown, I've watched quite a lot of videos on YouTube of traveling, like tours, walking tours, or boat tours. What we really like to watch are train films where you've just got a camera at the front of a train that's going through Norway.
Interesting, yeah. I've seen some of that stuff.
Yeah, like just 8 hours of a train going through the snow. We love that stuff in our house. But anyway, so watching Nosferatu in Venice, there's so much just walking around Venice that I felt a bit like I was watching one of these lockdown walking tours on YouTube, except every so often it looked like David Bowie from Labyrinth jumps out and rips somebody's shirt off, and bites her on the neck, and that was kind of that was how I felt about that film.
Well,
it did make it. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a fascinating film in that it's mostly a sequel to Nosferatu, as if made by someone who just wanted to make an exploitation film, and then there are moments of it that really just feels like we're watching a little bit of the behind the scenes documentary of trying to coerce Klaus Kinski into doing what he's told. It's bizarre.
It did make me think we should do a little Italian vampire season on here at some point, though.
Well, that could be fun, yeah.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of those when you think about it. But yeah, so I watched that, and I also watched the Michele Soave's film Stage Fright the other day.
I like that film.
Yeah, that's just come out on Blu-ray over here, and I'd never seen it before. Like most of these films, I'm coming to them for the first time usually, and that was really interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I could see how that would have been a really popular VHS back in the day. And yeah, that was an interesting movie. But anyway, that might be another one to work into a season at some point, maybe just a bunch of Soave films in a row or something.
I would love to do that, yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm quite keen to get to our film. Oh, I did watch as well. I gave myself like a little mini film festival on the last day before I had to go back to work. And I watched about 6 movies. And so one of them, as well as those two as mentioned, was Pasolini's Arabian Nights, which I watched in preparation for today. And they have barely anything in common at all. But I wanted to do, because obviously that's what the films that we've been talking about have been based around what Pasolini was doing. But what's particularly interesting with what we're doing today, so Pasolini's Arabian Nights came out in 1974, and the film that we're talking about today is by Antonio Margheriti, or Anthony Dawson as he is in the credits, and it's his version, which was called Finalmente le 1001 notte, which means finally 1001 nights.
Yes.
And so, but that came out in 1972. So he actually beat Pasolini by 2 years.
which is amazing. But
yeah, and Pasolini was not a happy man at the best of times. And I think this whole, as we've talked about before, this whole thing hacked him off completely, which is why he went off to make Salo after he did Arabian Nights, because he was so annoyed that audiences were going to see all these rip-offs of his movies. So I think what happened was the Italian filmmakers, after the first Decameron, they knew what Pasolini was planning to do. And so they started with, making all these Decameron films and Canterbury Tales films that we talked about last time. Now, there don't seem to be that many. I was trying to... It's very difficult because they had so many titles. Most of the Italian Decameratici films seem to be either Decameron or Canterbury Tales based. I couldn't see any others that appear to be purely Arabian Nights, apart from this one. There might be some more, but I couldn't spot them. But yeah, it's interesting that he did this before Pasolini got there, but it was still basically cashing in on Pasolini's trilogy.
Well, I think that the reason there probably aren't more of these types of films, these Arabian Nights films, is they're probably a little bit more expensive to shoot. I mean, you're talking about there's no way to reuse these costumes for some other type of some other type of setting. So
Yeah,
you're not
unless
you're
they
not doubling
still
up.
had a load of unless they still had a load of peplum costumes in storage from 10 years earlier.
But even that, I don't
Then
know.
yeah, no. But what is interesting, I really liked this film actually. But you mentioned there, yeah, it does look expensive. It looks like they shot a lot of it on location,
Oh yeah,
and I'm not. I've been able to find very little information about the film and where it was made.
well, the exteriors I'm not sure about, but it's definitely
Yeah.
somewhere in a desert setting, and this is it's those bits under the opening credits that really sell the location. But
Yeah,
I did find a spot. I did find I found out where the Sultan's castle, that interior. I did find out that that's actually in Italy. It's in Florence. The interior,
okay.
the main set where the stories are being told to the to the Sultan. They're in the castle of Samazzerno in Lecce,
Okay.
there in Florence. It's
How cool.
yeah. I've seen a lot of photographs of it. It's like, yeah, it looks like something right out of Scheherazade, but it's in Italy. Yeah.
That's really interesting because some of those interiors are amazing. And so I did wonder how they did that. So that makes sense. So yeah, it looks like the exteriors were shot somewhere in the Middle East. And it does feel like Margheriti was going back to the old ground that he trod when he made The Golden Arrow,
Yeah.
which is a film that you and I spoke about on your podcast a couple of years ago. I'll tweet that out. But yeah, I mean, this obviously even down to the whole flying carpet thing. There's a lot of connections between the two films, even though they're about 10 years apart.
Well, one of the things we should tell people, that one of the reasons maybe why Margheriti's films they have a tendency to look bigger than their budgets is because he was willing to tromp off into the middle of nowhere to shoot his films. I mean, he was all over the place. I mean, he'd go shoot in Turkey, he would shoot in the Middle East, he would go to the Canary Islands, he would go anywhere. It seems. I mean, maybe I would love to see an interview with him somewhere where someone asked the question, "Are you making these films because it allows you a good vacation someplace that you want to visit?"
That's very true. I think he went to Brazil when he did the Indio and Indio 2.
Oh, I
they
think
were
you're
in
right.
Brazil or something. Yeah, he was a very well-traveled guy. And yeah, this does. And he even went. He did go to Hong Kong when he made. What was that really bad one called?
Oh, you mean the
Mr.
Mr. Hercules
versus Karate.
Yeah, that. Oh, you're right. That was shot in Hong Kong, and it didn't make the film any better. Ugh.
No, sadly. So this film, yeah. So in English territories, it had a couple of different names. In the UK, this did get a release in 1975. So 3 years later, it was shown over here under the title "Bed of a Thousand Pleasures." But if you look it up, I think possibly in America it was known as House of a Thousand Pleasures. That's what it's on the IMDb.
Yeah.
It says it was known as House of a Thousand Pleasures, and there's a poster for the film House of a Thousand Pleasures on there, but it doesn't look anything like this film. So I don't know if that's a mistake or because I thought wasn't there House of a Thousand Pleasures, a Vincent Price film?
No.
Was that
No.
House of a Thousand Dolls?
No. Now you're confusing me. House with there's like Night of a Thousand Cats. That's not a Vincent Price film though. But yeah, I've seen the title for this listed as 1001 Nights of Pleasure and House of 1001 Pleasures. I don't know if maybe some distributor somewhere thought, movies, we're making a good deal of money off movies that start with the word house. Let's sling that in there.
Yeah, let's throw that in there. But yeah, I think Bed of a Thousand Pleasures is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we've talked about the locations, and that's really fascinating to know that's in Florence. I've been to Florence, but I was only there for an afternoon, and it is a spectacular place. But I didn't get to look in any castles. I basically I saw the main stuff in the middle of the city, and I saw the Michelangelo's David, and that was about it. I was only there for a couple of hours.
Courtyards and museums, essentially.
Yeah, but it was very cool, and I'd love to go back. I mean, right now, I'd love to go anywhere. So I'm so bored of not travelling anywhere ever. But if I do ever manage to get back to Florence, I will go and find this place. That would be really, really funny. So yeah, it's an interesting movie, and it takes as its basis, because what's interesting with 1001 Nights, obviously we know about Aladdin and we know about Ali Baba, all these kind of stories that come out of it. Isn't Sinbad from 1001 Nights as well?
I do believe so. At least there's a connection. I'm not sure if it was actually one of them, but it's very possible. I hate to say that I don't remember.
And it's based around the idea that Scheherazade is telling these stories, and she has to tell a new story every night. So there's this collection of this 1001 stories. And what I liked about this film was, although they've basically made it all up, they're still keeping the sense that this is about telling stories, which is something that in Pasolini's film doesn't really happen. We just see a few different stories and they sort of intertwine. There is one story that's being told to somebody, but for the most part we're just seeing a bunch of quite random stories that generally involve people having to take their clothes off.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty extraordinary film. It's not as good as Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales is mad. There's some really insane stuff in that film. I think he was running out of energy maybe by the time he got to Arabian Nights. Also, he didn't cast himself. He's in the other two, but he's not in this one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's very little that connects them, other than there's a kind of linking story that runs all the way through Pasolini's film about the slave Zumurrud, who hooks up with this guy and they're in love, and then he loses her and he has to find her, and it takes most of the movie for him to find Zumurrud. And so I was interested when the film starts and we meet the Sultan, and he's getting this new slave girl, and her name is Zumurrud.
Right.
So
an obvious connection, yeah.
Yeah, so that was kept, which I thought was good. But then obviously what happens there is completely different. So what I thought we would do, I've got the film was reviewed in Monthly Film Bulletin for its UK release. So I thought we could use the review because it's quite helpful in its quite lengthy plot summary. So we can go through this and then we'll just throw in what we think, if you like.
I have much to say, yes.
Good, okay.
And I should preface this before we get too deeply into this. I don't think I don't think we're going to be very cruel about this, but both of us are avowed fans of Antonio Margheriti, the director of this film. But we also are well aware that he didn't always make a great film. And in a lot of cases, for me at least, maybe the same for you. I'm not sure. I'm not willing to put you on the same boat with me on this in this statement. The moment that Antonio Margheriti starts playing around with comedy, it's dire. I mean, just dire. Yes. I have never seen a comedy that Antonio Margheriti has made that I would ever rate higher than about a 4 on the 1 to 10 scale of quality, because I don't think his sense of what a mass audience wanted in comedy matches mine in any way, shape, or form, and so therefore only occasionally do I find anything in his comedies to be funny. So maybe it's good that in movies like this he's taking so many shots that occasionally he manages to almost accidentally make me laugh. But
yes,
that's something we should preface this with, is that we are fans of the director, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be kind to one of his comedic efforts.
That is true. And obviously we've been talking about Italian comedy across the podcast with our Franco and Ciccio film. Yeah. Ciccio!
Oh God, don't start that again. Don't do that to me. Don't.
And then obviously the last 2 films we've done have been comedies that are sort of quite hit and miss. I will say up front, I thought quite a lot of this was funny. I laughed quite a lot in this movie, if I'm Going to be honest.
I laughed. I laughed a little bit. I have to admit, and there are a few moments
Yeah.
that I thought were pretty clever. But
And there's also some stuff that is really quite offensive these days.
I don't even. It's not even the offensive stuff that bothers me. It's the stuff that it's just obvious. It's just over obvious to the point of let's make sure the 8-year-olds can get this joke. You know.
Yeah. Although 8-year-olds really shouldn't be watching.
Yeah, but they will be. Trust me.
So this film was an X-rated film in the UK, primarily because there's just a lot of naked girls
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in this movie. So we start with these amazing location shots where we see this the Sultan, I think he is, and he has this reputation for being a great lover. And he's been gifted a new slave girl, Zumurrud,
Yep.
who is this renowned beauty, and she's going to become his slave, and that's fine because this is the old days and slaves are allowed, apparently. And so they come into the palace, and then there is a sort of the guy that brings her. I'm not sure who he is. I don't know, like her agent or the guy that's selling her, or
Or
I'm not
yeah.
entirely sure. We're not really interested because we're more interested in him and in
And
Ali
staring at the naked slave
and
girls.
Zumurrud. So Zumurrud begins to do the dance of the seven veils, and this is a great entertainment value for all the people in the court who are watching. But and then he's being told, he's telling them a story as she removes each veil. It's about wind blowing and other things happen, and then something else happens which causes another veil to fall until she's down to just one veil, and then that's up to this Sultan. He's the wind that will remove the final veil, and so they retire to his little room full of cushions where they're going to get down to it. But all of a sudden, there's this terrible cry because he can't perform, and he doesn't understand why, and it must be somebody else's fault.
Well, of course,
he's
because
old.
it's not just because he's an old fat
He's-
guy. No.
Exactly, he's been drinking too much wine. So he demands that his courtiers sort this out and get him going again. And so they decide that the way they're going to do that is by gathering together a bunch of people who just happen to be there. I don't know who these people are. And they have to come and tell him stories to stimulate and arouse him. So
Erotic
that he can-
tales.
Yeah, so that he can then get it on with Zumurrud, who's just sitting there. I don't think she speaks actually in the whole film.
Yeah.
She's, but her name is on the poster, so there is that at least. So Zumurrud is played by an actress called Femi Benussi, who I didn't particularly recognise, and she's basically just there to wear a big wig and be nude.
Well, I definitely have seen her in other films. I have to admit that what I remember about her is that she's stunningly attractive and quite photogenic. But I've seen her in mostly small roles. I'll have to admit. I mean, she's in Bava's Hatchet for the Honeymoon and
Oh yeah,
and
I think she's in Strip Nude for Your Killer.
yeah, exactly, where you see just about all of her. She was also in Bloody Pit of Horror in 1965, and So Sweet, So Dead, which is a really good film. She's got a role in that, and The Italian Connection, and basically a lot of films in the 70s where the main requirement for her to be in the film was to be naked. She worked with Antonio Margheriti on the spaghetti western Blood Money, which is also it's the karate film with Lee Van Cleef. The spaghetti western with Lee Van Cleef. She's one of the I believe she's one of the women who has part of the part of the map for the treasure they're searching for in that particular film. tattooed on her backside. So once again, just be naked.
Oh, not again.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's Blood Money.
there-
It's
you
also
could-
known as The Stranger and the Gunfighter. It's got a lot of titles.
Yeah, you could write a book, and I've sometimes thought about it, of all the films where the plot revolves around a woman who's got a map to secret treasure tattooed on her bum.
I'm surprised there haven't been just loads of books
There are
written about it.
so many.
So many of those. In other words, it's one of those. Well, okay. I'll tell this funny story. This film became famous in the town in which I went to the last couple of years of high school because it was a film that got brought in case they needed a movie to show to the entire high school population to kill time for some whatever reason, some kind of whatever it may be. And somebody did not preview this film, and they showed The Stranger and the Gunfighter to a high school crowd.
Oh, wow.
which is rife with not just it's not just that it's a Western, which is what clearly made the people who made this choice think it was going to be perfectly
it'll
safe.
be fine.
But it's just like a lot of naked women's butts, which is not something you want to show to a juvenile crowd trapped in a high school being forced to watch a movie on 16 millimeter. And what's terrible is that I was not there for this. This apparently had happened the year before I started going to school there, and yet it was still such a legendary story that it was being talked about forever afterwards.
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite a happy high school memory.
Well, like I say, I missed it, but there you go. But yeah, she's quite Femi. Is it Benusia?
Yeah,
Benusi. Okay, she's absolutely gorgeous, and of course, she was in so many erotic adventure stories. Malabesia in '78, where she plays she plays a role there. It's a strange road to go down, folks, but you can if you wish.
She was working.
Oh yeah,
so that's good. She was getting plenty of work. So I should also mention the Sultan himself, Sultan Al-Mahmud, was played by Luigi Antonio Guerra, who was in our film last time, The Sexbury Tales. Although I'm not sure which story he was, but I think he was somebody in there. There were so many characters in that film, I can't remember. But anyway, so they can't do it, and so they need some erotic tales to get him going, get him into action. So this is where we start to then get some stories, which is where it ties in with the whole 1001 Nights thing. So the first story, this is quite a funny one, I think. So a blind man comes to sit and tell the story, and he talks about another sultan somewhere called Samandar, who has a magic mirror. And this guy prides himself on being the greatest lover in the city, and they bring him his breakfast to wake him up in the morning, and when they take the lid off the breakfast, like this big tray, a big dome over it, there's a naked woman covered in grapes and fruit, and that's his breakfast.
If that didn't wake you up.
Yeah, so he's the greatest lover in the city, but he's got a talking magic mirror, and but the mirror tells him that he's no longer the greatest, he's the second greatest. So he wants to know who is the greatest lover, and it's a guy called Abuise
or something like that. Yeah,
something like that. And he is apparently known by all of the women in the town.
Yes,
like all of them. He knows all of the women without even seeing their faces or hearing them speak. So it becomes a challenge, basically, that he will be allowed to say, yes, he is the greatest lover in the city, if they can put him in a room in the dark and then have loads of different women come in and have sex with him. And if he can say their names, then he's the winner.
Right. All he has to be able to do is to identify whichever woman they send to him correctly, and he will be, and he's going to be given, I forget how much gold, like 10,000 gold coins or something like that.
Yeah, he'll be a rich man. So he's got to make love to all these women and then say their names afterwards, whilst whilst the Sultan sits outside and listens, in getting increasingly furious, because this guy has got such a great reputation that all the women, they all want to join in.
Yes.
Like he lines up all these women and says, okay, who's going to volunteer for this task? They all step forward, but they're all so excited.
Well, they're very patriotic. They want to help out their Sultan,
So because this guy is getting it right every time, the Prime Minister suggests that the last woman they should send in is the Sultan's own wife. And of course he's furious at that idea. But then he explains, I see, it's a catch-22, because if he says her name, that means he has done it before, he recognizes her, so then you can execute him for adultery. But if he doesn't know her name, that means he fails the task, and then you can execute him. So it's a win-win. So
there's no way to lose on this one.
Yeah, this is completely foolproof. So the Sultan agrees, sends his wife in, who has a lovely time, and then when they come out, he tells her, "Oh, it was your wife." And he's like, "Great, I've got you now." So he brings him out, he gives him all the money, and then he takes it off him straight away, and he's got the executioner all ready to chop his head off. But then this is where the punch in the gut. Well, do you want to explain how he gets out? How does Abu Issa explain himself?
Oh, it's very simple. As he's about to have his head chopped off, he explains that he knew that it had to be the Sultan's wife because, of course, she is the only woman he'd never had before who lives in the city. Perfect.
And now he has
all that gold.
So he has the
and
gold.
And it's not, and he can't be accused of adultery because the husband of the woman sent her to him. So there you
go. And he's now had sex with everybody.
Exactly. He's checked that one. He's checked that final woman off his list. Can move on.
Because all he needs to do now is just move on to another city and start again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty funny. And so then we get back to Al Mahmoud, the Sultan, who's hearing the story, and it hasn't done it for him. This story has not, which of course it wouldn't, because it's basically a story about another Sultan being rubbish.
Another Sultan really failing at attempting to prove how awesome he is. Yes.
So, but then the blind man, they're about to chop his head off, and they realise he's died telling the story. I don't know whether it was because it was so exciting that it killed him. So then two young men come in to tell the story of Aladdin's grandson.
Also named Aladdin for
also
giggles,
called Aladdin, the grandson of Aladdin, and they make this big thing about saying the grandson of Aladdin. No, the grandson of Aladdin, the grandson of Aladdin.
Questa è la storia di Aladino, nipote di Aladino.
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 I'm not entirely sure why.
Not sure why. Maybe there's an attempt. Maybe it's funny to make it a separate thing from a tale of Aladdin, as if. But I don't know why. Maybe it's a cultural thing, or maybe there's a joke we're just not getting because it's almost 50 years later. We have no clue what the Italians would find amusing in this respect.
Yeah, so. You say almost. It is 50 years later.
Oh, no, that's true. Yeah,
scary. 1972. Here we are.
Oh God, it is 50 years ago. That's true.
It's pretty terrifying. So this is the story of Aladdin, which is probably the most famous of all the stories of the 1001 Nights. And so this is Aladdin's grandson who knows where this cave is. It must be a family secret. So he goes to the cave where he can find the lamp, and he wakes up the genie. And this is where we start to get, because there weren't any special effects in the first story, but this is where we start to get some of Margheriti's low-budget special effects magic.
Mm-hmm.
And he wakes up the genie from the lamp, and the genie sort of towers above him, which I like the way they do this, because in the wide shot, he's sort of superimposed to be bigger than Aladdin. But then for the close-ups, they've just stood this guy on a platform so that his head is near the roof of the cave.
Yeah, they're just using forced perspective to make him look larger than life. Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty clever and quite a neat and cheap way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So he wakes up the genie. And what does he want? He's in love.
He's in love with a married woman, though.
He's in love with Barbara Boucher, and who wouldn't be?
I was about to say, I do believe that most of the planet in 1972 was probably in love with Barbara Boucher. Or let's call it by what it is, in lust with Barbara Boucher.
Yeah. Now we talked about her in the last episode because she was in one of those Canterbury Tales films, the All Naked Horse, where she was the naked horse.
Yes.
So this time she gets to do some quite good comedy business. So he's in love with this woman. She's married to an older man, and he wants the genie's help. Now I don't quite understand the genie's reasoning here, but the genie gives him two suggestions. The first one is an invisibility potion.
Yeah.
Which he can drink, and then it'll make him invisible, so he can go and visit her, so that's fine. But then he also tells him about a magic carpet that he can use so that he can take her out to fly amongst the stars. But this carpet will only land again after they've made love at least 3 times.
Yeah, on the carpet, which seems a lot to ask.
Yeah. But I was really confused then, because he's like, great, okay, so the genie goes back in the lamp, and Aladdin takes the invisibility potion, and then leaves the carpet behind, and just walks off. I assumed he was going to fly there on the magic carpet whilst he was invisible, but no, he's off. So he whips all his clothes off, except he forgets to take his hat off. So there's some shots of just a hat floating along, scaring people. Now, of course, I hate to bring this up, Rod.
Oh, God, what?
This is only a year after, or a year or two after Antonio Margheriti did Mr. Super Invisible.
Oh God, don't bring that film up.
So, well, I'm not gonna mention the chimp, but damn it,
you're not going to mention the thing that you just mentioned. You're a lying bastard.
But obviously Margheriti's just had recent experience in pulling off invisibility tricks.
Oh, this is true. Yeah.
So this whole scene here is full of floating objects and curtains being moved out of the way, and he eventually gets to Marianne by climbing up the ivy and then across the balcony.
Yeah.
And we even see the ivy moving around as he's climbing along. So it's pretty well done. And then he embraces Marianne, and she's shocked to discover that he's naked, and he's caught a cold from walking around in the nude, so he keeps sneezing, which is quite funny. But he explains this plan to her, but then they also get down on the bed, and there's a whole thing where she's kind of, this is the sort of funny stuff for her, I think, where she's having to pretend to
embrace him, when there's actually nothing there, yeah.
And he's pulling at her clothes, and all sorts of stuff is going on.
This I have to give full credit here. This sequence and the scenes that follow show me that this is something I was not aware of. Barbara Boucher had some comedy chops. She's good at. She's not over mugging for the camera at any point in time. No. She's actually good at communicating well the funny bits of business in a way that don't feel like someone's playing to the back seats of the theater. She's doing a pretty good job here, and I don't know why it surprised me so much. I guess because it's just that I'm so used to seeing her in much more dramatic roles and really tense thrillers and things of that type. But she really had some chops for comedy. I'm a little surprised, and I was kind of impressed.
Oh, good. Yeah, she did do a few other comedies as well. If you look at her, I mean, obviously she's just like most actresses at that time. She's just in everything.
Yeah, this may be the first time I've ever seen her do comedy, and I'm really really happy with her abilities.
Yeah, because obviously the sex comedies were so huge in those days that she's in a bunch of those.
Yeah,
primarily to be there to whip her top off, I think, probably.
Or to dance naked on the hood of a car,
to be not too crude about it. But yeah, she does get to actually do some quite good comedy in this scene as well. And so they make this plan. Her husband comes along, and she has to explain that she was having a dream and dreaming about him, and he's a bit sort of confused as to why she's writhing around on the bed on her own. But then, so they make this plan that she needs new carpets for her room. She wants new carpets. And this is perfect because Aladdin's got this magic carpet. So the next day, Aladdin turns up pretending to be the carpet deliverer. But he brings 2 carpets. Now, this is where the hilarity comes in.
Yeah, this is where you can see it coming towards you.
Yeah. Brings 2 carpets, 1 magic carpet, 1 non-magic carpet. And he establishes with her that she has to wave the lamp in the window 3 times, and then he will know that she is in position on the magic carpet. And then he will use his magic words to make the carpet come out, which he does. So the first night, this all works. She flies out and they get on the carpet together, and they fly off into the sky and have a lovely time. And Margheriti is using exactly the same magic carpet flying techniques that he used in The Golden Arrow.
Yeah.
Which I thought was nice. So he's got a real carpet on a crane or something in the space, but then he's also using sort of blue screen.
And he's cutting back and forth
as well.
Yeah, he's cutting back and forth really cleverly, so that you're always seeing a slightly different view of the carpet, and so it sells the effect much better than just a single way of doing the effect. It's really good stuff.
So they make love twice, and then she wants to go down again, but he explains. We've got to do
you used the bad
times.
phrase there. She wants to go back home, not go down.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. I apologise, everybody.
And he explains the whole 3 times thing to her. Oh man,
Yeah.
Okay. Our language is filled with pitfalls. Okay.
Yeah. So you're right. She wants to land.
Yes.
And he explains, no, this isn't going to work unless we do it another 3 times. Sorry, 1 more time.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you're just saying that. So they try it. They try saying the magic words, but it doesn't work. So she's like, okay, fair enough. So they do it 1 more time, and then everything's fine.
Then we move to the second night.
The next day, he pushes his luck and tries again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, he runs back to tell the genie that it worked. So he's very excited. It all worked. But he wakes the genie up. But he annoys the genie because he wakes up the genie whilst he is in the lamp is in a different place. So the genie comes out and bangs his head on the ceiling.
Yes.
So
the level of humor is so high.
So the suspicion is, so the next day things go a little bit wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the genie getting his revenge? That is the question.
It's a good question.
And so the next day, the carpets, basically, to cut a long story short, the cleaners mix up the carpets, so the carpets are the other way round. She's had too much to drink, and so she falls asleep. The husband gets up, gets on the carpet, accidentally waves the lamp in the window. Aladdin calls the carpet out, gets onto the carpet. It's not until they're in the air that he realizes what's happened here and that he's actually on the magic carpet with her husband, the Sultan.
Yes.
And then, of course, the Sultan is furious, demands that they land. Aladdin explains they can't land unless they've made love 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, the Sultan says something like, "Well, okay, it's it'll be a new experience," and agrees. And so the next day, we cut to back at the palace, and the Sultan is giving praise to the new, what is it he calls him?
I can't.
Basically, like the great beauty of their court, and Barbara Boucher, she looks all pleased because she thinks it's her, and then actually the camera pans across and you see her how annoyed she is because the camera cuts to Aladdin, because the hilarious punchline of this story is that her husband has turned gay.
Yes, the quote-unquote hilarious punchline. Yeah.
in each of these situations, there is a eunuch, and the Sultan has a eunuch, and the eunuch is depicted in this film as being very camp, and so there's quite a lot of basically homophobic jokes about being gay and lots of camp references.
Yeah,
and this
pretty
is the sort
over
of
obvious
punchline
gay
as-
jokes.
Yeah, which we saw that in Ubalda. There was quite a lot in that film as well.
Yeah.
So clearly, this was something in the air in Italian culture at that time.
Oh
There was
well,
a
yeah.
lot of-
I mean, it's the macho culture. Of course, you're going to, you're
Yeah.
going to make fun of the homosexuals because, of course, that's a class that you can make fun of relentlessly, and it's always good for a cheap laugh. No matter what you do, you're going to get those people who, even if they really don't think it's particularly funny or completely understand it, are going to go yes. But it's as cheap as it sounds, but.
And of course, ending your story with that punchline is not going to help the great Ali Mahmoud get his mojo on.
Well, I have
With
before we
Zumurrud.
move away from the magic carpet.
Oh yeah,
I
go
think
on.
that other than the obvious, yes, rife with silly and pointless and rather idiotic, lowbrow gay jokes. Clearly that's it's the 70s, duh.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta say, this is the perfect example of what is misaligned between Mr. Margheriti and myself as far as comedy is concerned, is perfectly illustrated by the fact that they overlay the sound of a motorcycle when the carpet is in motion. And it's just like, no.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
It's a terrible, terrible choice. And
Yeah.
it immediately makes me just want to slap somebody. Just stop doing that. So
Didn't he do that? Oh, we've seen that in something else recently, where there was the sound of an airplane. Didn't
Yeah.
he do that in The Golden Arrow? Where there's a
oh
isn't there
yeah,
a sound
there's like
of
the sound of a jetliner or
of a
something.
jet. Yeah, there's a jet plane.
Yeah,
when
so
the magic
clearly
carpet flies.
he thought that the juxtaposition of some modern sound that we would all recognize with a period of time set hundreds of years in the past is just absolutely hilarious. And it's like, you want to pull him to the side and go, no, maybe if you were 8 years old and making a film, I could understand your desire to do this, but you're not. Stop.
Yeah, no, it's not good. And the story fails to help Ali Mahmoud, and so the two storytellers who told the story of Aladdin's grandson get their heads chopped off immediately.
Whack.
And then we cut to the final story, which is being told by a young woman. And she talks about a kingdom where there was a princess who demands, like once a year, she holds a contest. And the winner of the contest will get to marry her and become ruler of the land. But to win this contest, you have to be able to make love to her 13 times in one night, from like midnight to when the cock crows.
And this immediately should tell you that this woman does not want to get married.
No, exactly.
This woman wants to once a year have an orgy, essentially,
Yeah.
and essentially try to kill one single poor soul and then move on with her
Yeah.
life.
And then there's a guy who comes forward who's up for the idea. And what I like here is it suddenly turns into a Western.
Well, he's dressed
And-
as closely as they can make him. He's dressed as
Yeah.
if he is the man with no name, played by Clint Eastwood in the spaghetti westerns made by Sergio Leone.
Yeah, and the soundtrack goes all sort of Western as well, which I thought was really funny.
Actually, that is funny. I was amused by that because that's a little bit of winking at the camera that actually plays well.
And so he's taken by, because he sort of puts himself forward, but a local guy in the town goes to show him the graveyard where all the previous men who've tried and died
Yes.
are now buried, which I thought was really funny. But he's still willing to give it a go, and so he goes into the palace and signs his name, and then he is introduced to lots of beautiful women who live in the palace and all sort of work for the Queen Aziza, who he proceeds to start having sex with.
Yes.
And the courtier is like, what are you doing? You've got to save your strength. And he's talking about, sharpening his knife or whatever it is he says, sharpening his blade, so that he will then go off like a rocket, I think he said. He's a very, very confident young man. But he makes one request, which is that between each go, he wants to be able to climb into the trees, because this palace has trees indoors, as you would.
Well, I thought they were outside in a courtyard.
Oh, are they? There's a courtyard or something. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. He wants to get fruit from the trees, and there are trees all around.
Yeah, there are all kinds of fruit trees, so he'll be able to choose different, whatever he wants. So they agree to it.
Yeah, which just seems fair enough. It's quite reasonable. If you're going to be doing that all night, you need to keep your strength up.
Mm-hmm.
So he finally gets to go in and meet Queen Aziza, played by Christine Schubert, who is an Austrian actress who mainly did German sex comedies. It will probably come as no surprise. And I think she may have done one of those like Schoolgirl Report films as well, all that kind of stuff. So but her job in this film is basically to have sex loads of times with this guy. And they proceed to get it on. Oh, but in the meantime, out in the city, I nearly forgot this bit. This is a major event. It's like a public holiday,
Yes.
And people are making. This is like sport, and they're all making bets as to how many times he's going to be able to do it.
And there's a guy who's tasked with holding up a board with the number of times upon completion, and then going up to a balcony and holding it out so everyone can see. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a sort of major. It's like the Super Bowl.
Yes, it's really kind of it's the World Cup or the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's one of these things where everybody's interested and everybody's paying attention. And it's the talk of the town.
So, and of course, as is no surprise, he manages to keep it going to the point where she starts to get exhausted, and she's not sure if she can keep going because they make it to 13,
and then he continues to go.
He keeps going. I think he gets to 23.
Yeah, something like that.
And then the guy with the scoreboard complains that his board won't go any higher than that. And so he wins. He's won the contest. But this is where we then get the big reveal as to how he did it. Rod, do you want to tell the listeners, how did he manage to keep going that long?
Well, after, of course, they're married and everything is in place, it turns out that he is one of 7 identical brothers. One of 8 identical brothers.
8, yeah.
And so what he would do is that they would station themselves in various trees, and so he would climb up into the tree to grab some fruit, and the not tired out brother would descend the tree with the fruit and continue on with their plan.
Which I suppose if you do the maths for that means each guy only actually had to do it about 3 times.
Right.
Which is, that's, I guess, if you're young and
virile,
that's
yeah,
no challenge at all.
that's what my memory tells me anyway.
Yeah, as long as you've got plenty of bananas on hand, you're fine. But there's an extra twist. Oh, and there's a little bit of split screen, so that we see all the brothers on the screen at the same time, which is quite good.
Yeah, well done too. Yeah.
Yeah, but then we get an extra twist. So they get married, and then she comes into bed with her husband, and she says to him, "Oh, I ordered them to kill the cock," meaning the cockerel, because of the whole "we've got to do this before the cock crows" thing. But then she opens up his shirt, and he's looking down, and she looks horrified because it's almost like they killed the wrong cock, because it turns out that this was the 8th brother, and he has been castrated. And the whole thing was actually done in revenge for the last guy that she had killed the year before, who I think only made it to 12 times.
Right.
And he was a friend of his. So this whole elaborate thing was done to get revenge on this insatiable princess. But that's not the end of the story, Rod.
Nope, we have to have the capper.
What happens because she's married to someone who's castrated?
We discover the Queen of Lesbos.
Yeah, she starts to get it on with all the girls that all her servant girls,
Exactly.
and becomes the first Queen of Lesbos.
Oh my
dear,
goodness! Yes.
it's painful. So the second story ends with a twist in terms of sexual orientation, and then this third one does it in reverse, and the Queen is forced by circumstance to become the Queen of Lesbos.
Yes.
And then,
yes.
but then the extra twist, we come back to Sultan Al Mahmud, who has actually fallen asleep. This story did not do it for him, and he fell asleep. So Zumurrud is still listening, and this is when the woman who's telling her the story turns out to be from the island of Lesbos herself, and has come to basically like bring Zumurrud back to Lesbos. And so they're leaning in for a kiss when suddenly Al Mahmud sits up and he looks at them both about to kiss, and he's like, oh, and then it freeze frames. And do we get a voiceover at that point that tells us what happens?
I can't quite remember, but it is very much obvious that we're about to have a threesome here, and so this has finally worked its magic. Yes.
There's a freeze frame, and then the voiceover tells us that this was basically how the threesome got invented.
Which I don't know about that, but hey, yeah,
so
I'll go along with it.
Al Mahmud, this was what he needed all along. He didn't. Zumurrud was not enough for him. He needed 2 women, and he was able to perform. And then I think the voiceover talks about how orgies are 6 people, and 5 people, that's fine. I think that was at the final line. 5 is still okay.
Trying to do that careful delineation of exactly what you're calling the sexual activity that you're involved in.
But I was interested. I wonder why they chose to freeze frame. It almost feels like he just ran out of money.
I don't
or something. Know. Like the film just basically stops there, and they have to tell us what happened in a voiceover, which I thought was a little bit weird.
It's an odd choice.
Maybe showing a threesome on a cinema screen in a Catholic country was too much.
Oh, that's a possibility I hadn't thought about. Yeah.
Even for a sex comedy, that was more than they could really get away with. I don't know, but yeah. So there you go, and that is the story of the Bed of 1,001 Pleasures, Bed of 1,000 Pleasures, House of 1,000 Pleasures. Finally 1,001 nights.
Exactly.
1,001 erotic nights, whatever you want to call it. Outdated, offensive,
silly,
sexist.
Definitely sexist. Obviously, I mean, sexist should have probably been the first word used. But...
The first one. But if you're able to watch it with the sort of trying to put yourself in the place of somebody who watched this 50 years ago, still quite entertaining, I would say.
Yeah, if you can accept what you're looking at for what it is, and definitely a piece of the time in which it was made, it has its pleasures. Not to be too obvious with the joke there, but and first of all is that it's gorgeous. It's shot in gorgeous widescreen. It's a beautiful looking movie.
Yeah, the cinematography is great. There's some really good use of widescreen and wide angle lenses as well and things.
Also, I have to go out of my way to praise the fantastic score, which I think is both appropriate and lush. It's Carlo Savina doing the musical chores here, and he does his usual stellar job. It's wonderful music, beautiful stuff.
And that's a good reminder. It was actually, the soundtrack was put out on CD 10 years ago.
Oh, was it? Okay.
But it's now out of print, and if you want to buy it, you're looking on Amazon, it's going currently for £86.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's a shame. They should reissue that, because it's a really fine score. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is very good.
I would like to say that Dino Verde, who co-wrote the screenplay with Antonio Margheriti, he's someone to pay attention to if you're curious about the work that. Well, I mean, you can look at his list of credits and realize that this is a guy whose career threads through Italian cinema from like the mid 50s all the way up through almost all the way up through the mid to late 90s, and he's responsible for having a hand in a number of really interesting movies. Argo Man, the Fantastic Superman. He did he did the screenplay for that in '67. Yeah. And if he did nothing else other than that, he would probably be someone that I would just tip my hat to right off the top of my head. But he's somebody who worked in these kinds of silly comedies, but he also was responsible for the story for some thrillers as well, like The Rip-Off and Death Walks in High Heels. He's one of those guys whose name threads through this entire period of time. But he was also apparently a successful songwriter. He wrote lyrics for songs that won music festivals and things of this nature. And so he had more than a few things going on. He wrote stage plays, and so Dino Verde, one of these little hidden guys whose name just pops up in credits. And the more you dig into his career, you realize, wow, this is another one of those guys who's kind of like hidden in plain sight, just because he's not someone whose name is ever really underlined. I mean, he wrote some Eurospy films in the '60s and stuff.
Don't forget Uncle Was a Vampire, the Christopher Lee vampire comedy.
Which I still have never seen. He was involved in that too.
I've got a feeling that was the first time Christopher Lee played Dracula
outside of Hammer?
After doing a Hammer Dracula.
You may be right, I think so.
I think it came because it was like the year later, so he went to Italy to do Dracula again in a comedy after doing that, which that's one to add to our list if we do a vampire list.
I sense that it would be a painful thing, but but I don't know that does Lee play Dracula in that? I mean, the character listing is for Baron Rodrigo.
I think he's basic
the Frankfurter.
Yeah, it's basically cashing in on Dracula. On the poster, he's Dracula.
We're not going to call it Dracula. I guess that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. And this wasn't even Antonio Margheriti's only Decameratici film.
Yeah,
he did another one the same year called Novelle Gagliotte d'Amore, which appears to be a lost Margheriti film. I cannot find it anywhere. I did some research a while ago and all of Margheriti's films to see what was missing.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, I became a little depressed and did a search myself, and I can't turn up a thing.
Yeah. I did a blog post on all the missing Margheritis, and this is on there. So if everyone knows where this film is, the translation, I believe, is something like short stories of convicts in love. And it's very, very much, looking at the imagery in the poster, it says Decameron on the poster, but the imagery looks like Canterbury Tales type stuff. They're all wearing sort of suits of armour and all that kind of, it looks very medieval. So so who knows where that is? But so Margheriti was very hot on the Decameron films, doing 2 in a year, because this was how he worked. He would just do whatever the money was there to pay. He would.
Well, I mean, more and more, the more I've learned about even the way film directors work today in Hollywood, is there are always multiple irons in the fire, and they're just waiting to see which one gets tapped for production. And so there's always 3 or 4 different things you can. The more I learn about different directors and their careers, it's pure chance that the films that actually got made rather than some other films that they were also interested in making. And sometimes making certain films meant, completely precluded the ability to make some other film that might have also gotten funding if, the green light came for one project over another, a month before or after. And so it's really interesting to look at someone like Margheriti's career, and you look at, him going from something like Naked You Die, also known as The Young, the Evil, and the Savage, to Vengeance, one of his better spaghetti westerns, to an amazing little supernatural thriller called The Unnaturals, and then And God Said to Cain, which almost feels like a bizarre combination of supernatural tale and and spaghetti western. And then the next film that he did in the line of production is something like Mr. Super Invisible, a silly comedy, and then Web of the Spider, which is a remake of his own Castle of Blood, and then the missing Decameron film that we can't find at all. It's really interesting to just know that whichever film got the money is where he had to go, and I completely understand it, but it also makes for let's just say if you did a watch of films in production order for almost any Italian filmmaker of the 70s, you were going to feel like you were being jerked back and forth left and right because there's no way to feel like you're watching a coherent series of films other than possibly just the name attached to the director's chair.
Yeah, absolutely. So this film was released in the UK in 1975. I haven't seen any. I mean, it must have been released in the US, but I couldn't find any reviews. It's not mentioned in Variety or anything like that. But so the review that I found in the UK from 1975, it said, despite some attractively lavish settings, this is the usual dispiriting mixture, dismally scripted, crudely dubbed. So that's interesting to know. There is an English dub somewhere.
Oh, I've not been able to find that.
Yeah, no. And hideously directed. with a sniggering emphasis on the unfunny mincings of practically the entire male supporting cast. That's fair.
I can't dispute that.
And then it closes with, by the film's own rules, everybody connected with its sexless and soporific narrative should be executed forthwith.
Okay, that's pretty good. I like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
So the film was distributed by a company I've not really come across before, nor my research into distributors, called Focus. They appear to specialise in importing this kind of stuff. The film was still on release. I found some listings for this film in cinemas in Aberdeen in 1979.
Wow.
So it was already 7 years old by that point. And it was doing a tour of the country on a double bill, or certainly two films in the cinema, perhaps not necessarily on the same bill, but playing in the same week, with a film called The Naked Man. And I've been trying to find out what this film, The Naked Man, is. And
it could be anything. It could be a weird title of almost any film. It's insane.
Yeah, so I've not had much luck. The closest I've got to, there was a German film, which it might be, but it was a documentary about life in East Germany, so I'm not entirely sure.
That doesn't sound like a good co-feature.
But, well, I mean, one thing I've learned over the years with distributors is that they could pick up something that was not intended to be a sex comedy. They could retitle it, and people would come and see it in the hope that there would be breasts. So it's very possible that they were distributing an East German documentary and calling it The Naked Man.
Oh, well, I mean, considering considering some of the titles of some of the schoolgirl report films from Germany, some of the subtitles of those films, it's like, that's definitely true. It's like, well, how can we communicate to the public that there are going to be naked girls in this? Let me think. Yeah.
Yeah, those films, oh dear, they're a little bit ropey.
Yes. Great music in those too, though.
Oh, yes. No, you're right. They really are. I've got the CD somewhere. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have just found, whilst we are speaking, I have found a review of The Naked Man. Oh, yeah, no, this is the one, distributed by Focus.
Oh, okay.
Here we go. This is Research Live. So The Naked Man was actually a German film called Oswald Kolle, Dein Mann, das Unbekannte Wesen. And it was a German film from 1970. So it is not...
Oh my God.
It's not the East German documentary that I thought it was. This is a sex education film. So it's a German sex education film with discussions about sex in marriage.
With a complete, I'm sure, with photographs that would hopefully titillate a sad audience, realizing that they've been marched into a discussion that they have no interest in. Yes.
Now, I haven't seen this one, but I did end up... There's a chapter in my PhD thesis about Swedish sex education films, because it was pretty common to get European sex education films and then repackage them as sexploitation movies and sell them in sex cinemas.
Well, that goes back to the earliest days of Hollywood in the 30s.
Oh, sure, yeah. So what was happening in America in the 30s and 40s didn't start happening here until the 70s.
Yeah.
Basically, we were like 40 years behind.
It's not a good thing to catch up on, by the way. It's
No, that's
particularly
true.
bad, actually.
But you've got all these guys in raincoats going to watch these films that are full of close-ups of diseased genitals.
I know.
And,
Oh, God.
and conversations with people smoking pipes talking about vibrators. That's really what these films tend to be. I watched a couple of the Swedish ones that I wrote about. They're really bizarre. So that's what this wasn't. So that was a film from 1970. So in 1979, those two, this film, the German film, and our Margheriti film were still playing in cinemas as X-rated entertainment.
That's amazing.
So that's quite interesting. Yeah, it sort of just shows what people had to do before they had the internet, I suppose.
Or just
But there you
any
go.
form of easy access to pornography.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was the only way to see naked ladies, was to see Italian sex comedies or German people showing you photos of horrible bits of other people's bodies. And anyway, on that note, I think so. Overall, then, what did you? If we look back at the three films that we've watched, the three Decameron films,
Oh, yes.
how would you rate them? Like, sort of rank them in order?
Well, this one, I don't find it particularly funny most of the time, but there was enough humor in it to keep me amused. So it's on like the 1 to 10 scale. I guess I give it about a 5. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't particularly like it. But it was beautiful to look at, and I loved the music. I was taken out of it occasionally by some of the sillier and more pointless bits of business, like the motorcycle sound over the flying carpet. There's some choices made that are very much of its time. That granted, the phrase "wouldn't sit well with an audience these days" is obvious. If you're watching this and you're not aware of what you're looking at, you're an idiot. But at the same time, it's also just not, it's not always my taste in humor, but I was not bored. It's such a pretty movie to look at, and I'm not above being impressed by absolutely gorgeous women. So sad to say, I'm not. I wasn't unhappy with watching this movie, but of the three, it's the last film that I enjoyed more, and it's the reason that I gave at the time, which is there are just so many stories that you never have time to get irritated or bored with stories. There's only really 3 stories and then the wraparound story in this one, and so there are points where you're just like, okay, I know this is only 90 minutes total, but let's get to the punchline. And
Let's move
really,
on.
the story I liked best in this is clearly the one with the 7 brothers, slyly taking care of business in the fruit tree. But at the same time,
Yes.
it's it is the last film that we covered that I thought was the best, the one I enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sexbury Tales, as its terrible English title called it. Yeah, that was funny because I think there's about 6 different stories in that one, so it does move at a pretty good pace.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
Yeah. Whereas Ubalda, All Naked and Warm,
It drags itself out so far.
Just keeps replaying over the same joke over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think I've enjoyed looking at these and sort of exploring the Decameron and the impact of Pasolini's films on Italian cinema at that time, and it really did kickstart the Italian sex comedy of the 1970s, which obviously there are just hundreds. It's something that we could come back to again if we're still doing the podcast, but maybe like in 10 years' time if we've run out of everything else to do.
We can come back to this semi-dry well.
Yeah, because there are so many of them. But yeah, that's been really interesting. So thanks. I know that Italian comedy, as we've said, is not everyone's go-to, but I think we've hopefully found a relatively decent way of approaching a few of them this time. So that brings me to what's the end of this episode, but there's just time to say what we're going to move on to. So the plan is that our next season we're going to go back to doing a full 10 episode season, and we're going to look at the polizioteschi genre.
Yes.
Or Felloni. So that should be we're in the same decade as these films, pretty much. Some of the same cast, as we've already mentioned, but a very different tone, I think it's fair to say.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah. So that will be interesting. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into those. Some of them I have seen, but some of them it'll be a first-time watch as well. So it'll be,
Yeah,
looking
that's
forward
one of
to
the
that.
exciting things about it is the list we're playing around with is a combination of movies that I am well aware of and have seen, and some that I have not yet watched, and so that's going to be fun to do.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again, Rod, for taking the time to do this and dip your toe into unfamiliar comedy waters. I nearly forgot to mention my favourite line of the film.
Oh, what?
The first blind storyteller. He sits down and he says, and I had to write this down because I thought it was so funny. This is the story of the greatest lover of all time, the powerful Samandar. All the easy girls run up to him like flies on a turd.
There's an image for
There's
you.
What a way to start a story.
I'm going to describe this great lover as a piece
Yeah.
of... well, I won't say the word. Well,
Yes.
I guess I could say the
So-
word, but no.
That's no wonder the Sultan was struggling to get it up. If that's the kind of storytelling he was
Yes,
subjected to.
yes. If he's surrounded by people who use such analogies, I
Yeah.
fail to see how he was able to ever have children. Yes.
Yeah, no. Well, but there you go. It was the threesome. That was the magic solution.
It's the,
Okay, anyway.
the typical heterosexual male fantasy. What a shock.
I know. So there we go. We will no doubt talk about Antonio Margheriti again
Probably so,
in
yeah.
the future. But hopefully our next podcast episodes will be far less focused on sex, which is probably a good thing. People don't want to hear that.
Let's elevate this above the waistline,
Yeah.
please. Yes.
Let's talk about people getting shot instead.
Yeah, and run over by cars, and
Yeah, often the same car. As we start to recognise, hang on, didn't I see that car chase in the last
Isn't
one?
that the same?
But anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come to that. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. Thank you also. We just hit 2,000 downloads
Excellent.
since we started. So thank you very much, everybody. Do tell your friends, share this podcast on social media. You can also contact us on social media. We're at Wild Wild Podcast on Twitter. And email is wildwildpod@gmail.com, I think. It's all in the show notes. So check there. I can't remember. But it'd be great to hear from you what you have thought of what we've been doing so far. And any suggestions for future episodes is always welcome as well. And that's it. So we'll say ciao for now. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. Thank you again, Rod. And we will talk to you all again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.